I'm Luca Giliberti, contributing writer for Gold Derby, and I'm joined today by Mark Duplass, who stars as Chip Black on The Morning Show. And Mark, when you talked to one of our editors for season one, you described Chip as a person struggling towards integrity. So
Mm.
to start things off here today, I'd be curious to hear from you, how much progress you think Chip has made on that journey to integrity, entering into this third season.
Yeah, I think it hasn't been a linear path. Most human beings don't operate on a linear path, and it's certainly that way for Chip. I just saw, it's more of a sine cosine geometric wave of ups and downs on that path. But I think what has been particularly interesting for me looking at Chip in season three, is that I think that while he has set a very high bar for himself, for moral and ethical integrity, particularly as it relates to the news, which he sees as a dying animal that he needs to fight for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I think what's happened is he's realized to a certain extent, there's a very dangerous Achilles heel for him in that journey, and that is his relationship with Alex Levy. I call it relationship, some might call it obsession, whatever you want to call it. So that has been the real fun thing to be able to play for Chip, as someone who, in a sea of questionable moral activity, Chip is arguably, the moral center. At least he
Mm-hmm.
was in the first episode in a lot of ways. In the first season, that is. Um, but it's great because he's got this place that really weakens him, and in his feelings towards Alex. So, I think that some of the things he does in season three are quite unethical, in my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
because
Mm-hmm.
of his jealousy, what's going on with Alex and Paul Marks. But what I loved in the writing, is in that big sort of finale scene, he really has a chance to express deeply how he feels about the integrity of the news, and he has a chance to save it, but only by really kind of sacrificing himself in order to do that. And to me, that sort of gains back a little bit of what he lost faltering through season three a little bit in terms of his integrity.
Yeah, we're going to dig into, or I want to dig into a lot of what you just said. And I kind of want to start with the integrity of the news because you said that he kind of looks at the news as being this dying thing. Because if you think about it, after everything that went down at UBA, after, the fact that he was fired, Chip still returns to the cutthroat, toxic world of this network, becoming Alex's producer. And then we find out that in between seasons two and three, he also came up with this idea for Alex Unfiltered. So I think it's
Yeah.
really clear that he's really there to stay in that world. So how much of him remaining in that world do you think is due to his love for that space, his addiction to that space? I think you've described it as a kind of drug before, versus,
Yeah.
him just wanting to be close to Alex. How much of it do you think it is, of those two elements?
Yeah, I think it's not dissimilar to certain other professions, like politics or like education, where people feel like this thing is broken. This thing is probably going to destroy me. I My identity is completely intertwined with it, so I don't know how I would live if I extracted myself. We saw that in season two. Chip tried to get out of the rat race for a little bit, and he just can't.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think that, what I find really interesting, about Chip is that, he really has not a strong sense of self, right? When you are a
Mm-hmm.
producer and when you're in service of this large entity like the news and the integrity of the news, there's no reason this guy's probably been divorced quite a few times and has very few personal relationships. Um, but I think what happens for Chip is, you go through the pandemic, you get into middle age, you start sort of questioning what it's all about. There's a little bit of that starting to happen with Chip, and he's
Mm-hmm.
thinking, God, maybe I can allow myself to have a girlfriend, and so I think that there's a little bit of midlife crisisy stuff happening with Chip, and I think he's starting to question a little bit of what is this all about, as well. So, it's a really fun character to play. There's a lot of different things happening, a lot of different colors. But at the end of the day, for me, the best thing about Chip really is, I think he's obsessed. I think he's
Yes.
obsessed with the news. I think he's obsessed with Alex Levy. And that really is my North Star when playing this character. There's always moments as an actor where you can kind of get a little confused and what am I doing? What am I playing here? Particularly with TV where you have to leave the character for a year and come back. And I always have to really center myself and remember, like, what are the North Stars here? I believe in the integrity of the news. I believe this thing is dying. I'm willing to self-sacrifice in order to do this. Uh-oh. I'm also just as obsessed with Alex Levy. And somewhere in there, I think, is the recipe for self-destruction.
Yeah, absolutely. And let's actually dig into his obsession with Alex because,
Yeah,
like you've said, it's kind of his feelings for Alex or the way he feels for her is kind of his Achilles heel. And I
yeah,
think it's safe to say that his feelings for her have only become more pronounced as the show has progressed, even though, as Bradley so astutely puts it in season three, he really is her whipping boy in a way, and
right.
he is fully aware of it. And I know that you've argued that it's kind of Alex's honesty that keeps Chip attracted to her. So would you say that's still the case in season three? Or why do you think he
Some of
is
it.
still attractive? Yeah. Or
It's
why do you
some
think
of it.
he's.
Yeah. But I think it's beyond an intellectual process of what is the thing that keeps him attached to Alex. I think it's, borderline pathological at this point. And for me, I think that he is the whipping boy for sure. But I think that there's also this sense that he thinks Alex is good for the news. And he thinks if Alex needs a whipping boy, so be it, so that she can have what she needs to make the news. And then I think that there's another element that I've been thinking about lately, and particularly with this season, is
Mhm.
as the news starts to crumble around him, as a person starts to feel, as Chip, I think, feels like I have no children, I have no wife, I have no friends. Um, my job is in trouble. Where am I possibly important and needed anywhere in the world right now? Well, Alex needs him. Like, and as much as she treats him like shit a lot of times, he's needed. And I think in some ways it's like, the the terrible behavior that a parent receives from their 16-year-old, but they get addicted to it because at least they know they're still needed there. So I think that's a big part of what keeps him, so quote unquote attracted to her, keeps coming
Mhm.
back to her. Um, but I also have this feeling, and this is really probably not my place to say, but I think something has probably happened in Chip and Alex's past. And I don't know if it was
Mhm.
calamitous. I don't know if it's just the years that they spent together. But I think if they went to therapy for 5 sessions, there would be an aha moment as to what is going on with this. Because it's more than just, oh, Chip has an unrequited crush and he's the whipping boy and she needs the whipping boy. There's something more, or at least I'd like to believe that.
Yeah, and I think that you also kind of see that in the eighth episode when there is this, classic heated argument between the two characters, which eventually leads to Chip's firing, which is not great for him, obviously. But he really gets to unload a lot of frustration that he seems to have kept bottled up until then. And I know that you're a big fan of getting to do some of the two-person scenes on
Mm,
this show.
love him.
So,
I love him.
so yeah. So what was it like shooting this one? Because I do think it is such an important moment for Chip.
Yeah, it's really cool. In some ways, I came up as an actor in the independent film scene, and it was always, let's light the room 360 degrees, pull up a camera, improvise it, shoot it, and move quickly. Cut to 20 years later, I'm on the morning show, which is the most, gorgeously lit, expensively production designed show I think I've ever
Yeah.
been around. But every now and then, there's a couple of scenes each season where we kind of return to that form where it's put up the cameras and let the actors go, and in season 2, it was that sort of big car fight at the end
The car
between
fight. Yeah.
Alex, and there were a couple this season, but I think the one you're talking about, sort of the big blowout between Chip and Alex in episode 8, that was particularly fun for me because I think that, in my mind, what's happening there is, of course, there's all the surface level professional stuff happening. But as we know, when grown-ups argue, we like to make intellectual excuses for why we're arguing, but there's
Yes.
always something childlike and emotional beneath the surface that none of us wants to admit to. And I think what's happening there is, in my opinion, Chip has always been right in the perfect spot for Alex Levy, right where she needs him, to whip him when she needs him. And he removed himself from that spot when he decided to have a relationship with Isabella. And as
Hmm.
much as Alex wants to tell herself, that doesn't bother me, it's fine, she lost something in Chip's dedication to her in that process. And then I think when Chip saw he lost the object of his affection and obsession to Paul Marks, it created this rift between them. So they can argue all they want that this is about work, this is about this, but a lot of it is that subtext of Chip. You're supposed to be the puppy dog pining for me constantly, and you didn't do that. And Chip thinking to her, you're supposed to be an object of my affection. That's always a possibility. And if you move towards
Hmm.
Paul Marks, that's going to make me upset. And I think that's a lot of the subtext of that scene.
Yeah, absolutely. Because when I was thinking about the scene, I was thinking about how it's very easy to kind of side with Chip in this argument because
Mhm.
he's obviously making, a lot of valid points. She has definitely abused him. There's no doubt about it. But I would also say that his affection for Alex or whatever he feels for Alex has also kind of led him astray because I think he thinks he's doing a lot of things or he thinks he's acting in Alex's best interest when the real motivator here is whatever he feels for her. So in many ways, he's kind of creating his own grievances, wouldn't you say?
I think you're absolutely right about that. And I think that that's one of the most fun things to play in Chip and something I can identify with in
Mm-hmm.
myself, is, the over intellectualization of your problems and convincing yourself that it's about some sort of high-minded issue and maybe placing yourself in the moral right so that you feel good about yourself in the argument, but all the while kind of dealing with just a tiny bit of self-loathing because a deep part of you knows this is some simple, puerile, childlike, jealous bullshit, and you're
Yeah.
just dressing it up in some intellectual integrity argument that kind of doesn't hold water. And I think that's tough. That's where kind of the self-loathing of for Chip comes in.
Absolutely, and I really like that you mentioned like this the childlike qualities of this argument and where both of them are coming from. Because if you also think about some of the things that he pulls out or some of the things he says, I mean, he blames her for ruining his relationship with
Yes.
Isabella, which is like that's crossing a line. That's like
Yes.
he ruined that relationship. He's responsible. Of course, she isn't somehow involved in
Mhm.
this, but it's his decision, right? He's the one who's still harboring some kind of feeling for Alex, and that's what got in the way of this relationship.
That's right. And I mean, to me, the ultimate, example of that is, that incredibly emotionally manipulative moment when he lets her know that he actually didn't have COVID at the end of it.
Yeah.
I mean, you replace those words with two 7-year-olds on the schoolyard saying, I know you thought your teacher gave you the extra lollipop, but it was actually me that gave you that lollipop, And it's like he's just doing whatever he can to hang on to her at that point. And I don't want to sound like a broken record, but it is what I love about Chip. He's so powerful. He's way smarter than I am. He knows how to balance the massive machine of TMS. He ran that place. But there's one thing that just he can't get over, and it's Alex Levy. And I think it's always going to be the thing that trips him up.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's kind of what I was talking about because if my memory serves me correctly, Alex didn't ask him to stay there.
No,
when she had COVID. She didn't ask him. He made that decision. So in many ways,
right.
he's creating his own problems because he thinks he's doing things for her when he's actually doing them for himself in a certain way, if that makes any sense.
It makes perfect sense. I think a psychologist would have just a lovely field day with Chip if he ever had the bravery to step
Oh,
into that office. Yeah.
oh boy, that would be definitely
Yeah.
a field day.
Yeah.
And then you already mentioned this moment, but then you have another big moment in the finale when Chip, goes on TMS and reveals that Paul Marks is planning on liquidating UBA. And I think that's kind of his go for broke moment in a way, and
Yeah.
also in many ways like a full circle moment because he gets to do what he had failed to do in the past, which is try to prevent a very ugly situation from transpiring at UBA. So, what do you think his motivations are heading into that interview? And at what point do you think he's like, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to lay it all bare. I'm just going to say whatever I want, basically.
Yeah, I loved that scene for a number of reasons. Mimi Leader was directing that scene, our producing director who's directed, the most episodes of any director on the show and really is our incredible fearless leader. So getting to be with her and design that scene and discuss it with her was awesome. Um, and I think what's happening here is, we've seen a journey with Chip that's not dissimilar in season one, where he has decided to make himself someone who's going to be a defender of integrity, right? But what I think is interesting and a little different about this season, first, what happens in this season, first of all, he has to go on camera to do it, which is the place he is least comfortable with in the world.
Right.
Like you
Yeah.
put a producer on camera and it's just like, kill me. I mean, that's the last place they want to be. So that was fun getting to play someone who's just intensely uncomfortable showing up in the first place in front of the camera. Um, but I think the major difference this year is, he realizes the element of self-sacrifice that is going to be required in order to do this, and I think at this moment he's feeling like, I think I just need to air this whole thing out. I think I need to be willing to make a potential buffoon and fool out of myself, on national television. Let everyone who would potentially hire me in the future know that I can't trust this person, and I can't hire him because there's no way he'll be a company man if he's going to willing to come out and out people like this on national television. So he essentially assassinates his career on national television in order to save what he thinks, is important and do his part. And, as I mentioned briefly before, that was really exciting for me to play. It's people talk about it a lot as like the Howard Beale moment from Network, but I see it almost more as like a Norma Ray type thing where, it's like
Mm.
I really need to rally around this thing, and this is what's critical right now, and this is what's going to help. And I think he says what a lot of people are feeling. I've had quite a few people who work in the news come up to me and say, this is what I feel, is that, yes, Twitter is wonderful. That's narrowcasting. We still need this incredibly flawed machine of broadcasting. And I do think he believes in that. So that was just really fun from, I would say, the place from which to play the scene. But also there was just some really fun logistical stuff and how we
Mm.
shot that scene, because I, as an actor, try to be honest about what I think I'm good at, which is weird because you can sound braggy. And then at the same time, I also try to be honest at what I think I'm not good at, which is weird because it makes you vulnerable and scared. And so, what I have found when there's a big emotional scene, I tend to be really great for about 2.5 takes, and then it just spends itself. So I'm always talking with my directors and my cinematographers, like, guys, don't start with a wide shot because
Okay.
we're gonna get all the gold, and then we're gonna come to the close up, and I'm gonna be a zombie. And it took me years to be able to admit that, because it made me feel like I was lesser, or I should be more like Jessica Chastain, who can do it 12 takes in a row, But the more I'm honest about it, it just works, better. So Mimi shot this thing in a way where we also had multiple cameras on it, but we did
Mm.
have to time for that big push move at the end
Right.
that the camera does. So I wasn't going to be able to do what I normally do, which is like get me in a couple of takes and get me out. I was going to have repeatability here. And it's quite a bit of anger that he has.
Yeah.
So this was the first time in a long time, if I'm being honest, where I had a moment of self-discovery as an actor on set. And it was that I have a lot more untapped anger in me than I thought I did. And I was with Nestor, who I've known for so many years. And he was just sitting next to me, just raging over and
Wow.
over in these takes. And he was just like, dude, are you okay? Like what's what's going on, you know? And it was really cool. It kind of connected me to Chip in a way that made me, I guess, realize there's something in me that's a little closer to Chip than I thought initially, which is Chip has this persona he needs to be in order to run the morning show. He needs to, do certain things. But he has to hold other things back. And I think that like I remember doing that scene and I remember thinking to myself, like, yeah, I was kind of a wild, irrational child. I learned as I got older, put that child away because you don't win in this business by bringing him forward. And you should be kinder and nicer and validate people's feelings more. And that is how I've chosen to live my life. But I kind of tapped into that irascible child for this scene. It was kind of weird, but also kind of exciting to access him and be like, oh, yes, Attila the Hun still lives inside of me. I don't bring him out every day, but he's there. And it was really fun to let him rage for a couple hours.
Yeah, so you're saying that season 3 of the morning show should be known as the show that allowed you to tap into your own anger.
It did. It kind of made me realize like, yeah, that's still there. And it was fun. So yeah. So I'm looking forward to a lot more yelling in season 4. So
Yeah, and we're definitely looking for it as well. I can't wait to see season 4. But Mark, thank you so, so much for walking me through season 3 and talking about Chip. That was such a pleasure to listen to. And congratulations on season 3. And thank you so much for taking the time today.
thanks so much. It was fun.